Welcome to 40 Fit Radio, where we bring you science-based, common sense information regarding fitness, health, and lifestyle for the 40-plus community. I'm your host, Darren Deaton, doctor of physical therapy with 28 years clinical practice experience, starting strength coach, and certified CrossFit trainer. Forty Fit Radio, real people, real fitness, real health.
Hey guys, welcome back to 40 Fit Radio. This is your host, Trent, and Double D, Dr. Darren Deaton with me. Today, we're going to wrap up the 10 Foundation series, as we've been calling them, with a talk about the big picture, putting it all together, getting a framework down for our training, and becoming more educated consumers of fitness. So, Darren, how do you think about the big picture when you're approaching somebody and trying to teach them about health and fitness?
Sure. So I think the first thing, Trent and I talked about this earlier before we started recording this podcast, and one of the things we both decided was we will not go back and rehash over the last 9 podcasts.
Yeah.
If you want to know specifically some of the general information that's provided, and it's important to recognize that these first 9 podcasts. The first one was really just the origins of 40 Fit. So it was basically built on the concept of why do we even have 40 Fit Radio, and why is the 40 Fit Radio podcast here today? And then the podcasts 2 through 10 are episodes that are foundational principles in different compartments of the health and fitness program for a master's aged individual. So we're not going to go back and rehash specific data or information that was given in each podcast. If you'd like to do that as a listener on the podcast, then you can go back to those episodes. That's all there for you in a general foundational presentation, but it's not so specific as we really drill down on those topics. We will be doing that in future podcasts. Yeah. But the big picture podcast is that it represents really the framework that I think masters should use mentally to be able to look at their fitness and health program and make it be outcome and results driven, and to demonstratively do something towards reaching the goals in their program. So that's important, because understanding that we're really not teaching as much this specific piece of information or that specific piece of dogma or whatever it is. Yeah. We're really teaching, how should I think, broader picture framework about health and fitness. You know, we're not trying to make you a robot. We don't want you to think just like I think, but I want you to think. You know, Trent and I talked about the concept of kind of the retirement analogy. I'm at that age now to where I don't know if I'll ever retire. I mean, you know how much of a workaholic I am.
Right.
Trent and I were talking about how busy our lives are right now with he and Jordan are moving, and I've got several business deals going on, and Trent and I are starting the gym here in
the world spins madly on.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And so we just got a lot of stuff going on, and yet at the same time, you know, I'm starting to realize at my age, and I think guys, when they get in their 50s and 60s, and women too, they start to think about, I use the guys term as non-gender specific. I mean, people. Yeah,
all inclusive.
Yeah, exactly, all inclusive. We start thinking about retirement, and what do we want to do as we grow older? What do we want our lifestyle to look like? What do we want our obligations to be at that time? Do we want to travel? Hobbies? Giving our time to things that are of significant importance to us with our grandkids and all those sorts of things. But I don't ever see myself not working. It's just not within my DNA.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this idea of retirement as you just sit on your butt on the couch and eat Cheetos and watch reruns of Seinfeld or something like that. But yeah, I mean, retirement ideally, or at least, you know, I think in the way that you and I think about it, is simply the freedom to go do what you want to do.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah, and I think we can use this retirement analogy as basically this, and I know this is a real common analogy that's used in a lot of other topical discussions, and that is when you ask someone, how are you planning for your retirement? They might say something like, well, I'm working real hard. Or, someday I'm going to be able to retire. And, well, what are you doing? Oh, well, I really don't, we're not really doing anything specific. Well, are you dollar cost averaging? Are you putting money back every single paycheck? Are you budgeting? Are you looking to the future? Are you living below your means? There's all these different concepts. Do you have differing levels? Do you have diversification in your portfolio? Do you have some investments that are more aggressive? Some investments that are real solid investments that have a much lower rate of return, but they're very consistent in how they return? And do you have some speculative investments? Do you have some real estate? So it's that whole diversification concept.
Yeah.
And so our goal is that people have a plan for that, is that you have a plan. And like you said earlier, Trent, put a pen and pencil to it. Get a calculator out.
I love what is it on Reddit? It's like, we did the math.
Yeah, exactly.
I like to do the math, and I'm not a math guy naturally, but there's something empowering about putting numbers to paper because it makes it real.
Yeah, sure.
It's like we're talking about. It's a plan. It may be a rough plan, but it's a plan.
Exactly. And I think that's the big picture here. The big picture is, for masters, is if you are walking into a gym today and you are walking in and you're relying on someone else to provide your programming, provide your nutrition, provide all of the fitness variables for your fitness and health program, that may be fine if they're providing you the right thing, and those components are going to drive you towards the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. In many cases, what I really find is that they're going to trainers, they're going to strength coaches, personal trainers who really don't know how to apply basic, good foundational principles specific to the master population.
Yeah.
And or worse than that, which is probably the majority of people, there's really no plan anyway.
Right.
There really is no sat down, sitting down and getting a plan and deciding, okay, what are the most important components of your fitness? What would you like to do? Would you like to increase lean body mass, decrease body fat? Where do we need your diet to be? Do you need to be in a caloric deficit or a caloric surplus or a negative net balance?
Right.
All these different things. And most masters really, they don't even have a program.
Yeah. I look back on my training, like when I was in college, I'd go hit the weights, and I weight trained, or I weight exercise, let's put it that way, 3 or 4 times a week. But yeah, I never defined those terms of what I was looking for. I kind of had this vague idea that I wanted to get more muscular. I wanted to get a little bit stronger. But it was a vague idea. I never sat down and said, I want to get stronger. I want to gain muscle. I want to gain weight. I just kind of had these vague concepts floating around. And what ends up happening is I'd draw up programs for myself, but it would be, all right, well, I'm going to bench. I guess I should do something for my back. So maybe I'll do some deadlifts, or maybe I'll do some rows, and then I'll do some lunges, and I'll go run a little bit because that sounds good. And it just kind of like filling in the gaps of everything that I'd acquired. And, what do you know? I ended up doing the same thing
over and over again
for years.
Yeah. Well, I talked to a patient the other day. He was in the clinic, and this guy comes from a bodybuilding background. I'm treating him for back pain. And we were talking, and I said, how many times have you walked into a gym, and maybe you've gone in this gym for 6 months, and you've seen the same guy doing the same exercise movement with the same load for 6 months. There's no progression there.
Right.
And most people's exercise programs are exercise programs. They're not training. Yeah. And, we've talked about doing a podcast specifically on training versus exercise, because those two concepts and principles are not the same.
Right.
And it's really important to realize that individuals that exercise on a regular basis, it's good. They're going to receive some level of benefit biologically. Their body is going to adapt. It's going to change to a certain level of tolerance, and they're going to get fitter.
It's better than nothing.
Exactly. And they're going to be healthier. Our goal is to reach that population that says, okay, I've kind of done that. And now what I really want to do is I want to drive specific goals towards specific health and fitness concepts. I want to get more lean mass. I want to be stronger. I want to have, lower body fat. I want to have better endurance.
Right.
And better endurance could be measured by this. I want my 5K time to be 21 minutes versus 28 minutes or 29 minutes. And so we can, if we have a goal in this overreaching framework concept, this big picture concept, if we have a goal that I want to be able to do these things in 3 months, I want to be able to do these things in 6 months, we set our goal out there. Then what we do is we then know as coaches how we need to program the fitness and health program to be able to achieve those goals. Our goal as a coach and our job basically is to program as closely as we can and as accurately as we can so that at the end of the day, at the end of that goal cycle, we have come as close to or exceeded, what is that term? Under promise and over deliver, that's really what we want to do. We want to get as close to or exceed that goal as we're working with our master's client.
Right.
And so that's what the big picture is.
Right.
It's helping people, helping masters basically get some goals in order, get some outcomes that they want to drive, and then develop their training program so that it is going to meet those goals and they're going to adapt to it.
Yeah, I think we basically follow the teach a man to fish philosophy. We are here to help you develop a framework and a model for what you're doing, how to get from point A to point B. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a model, then you don't have any way to understand how to change things or fix things when they don't work.
Sure.
Right? We all have things that work for us, quote unquote. Right? And that might be
confirmation bias.
Yeah, exactly. That might be the worst advice that I see all the time in fitness is just do what quote unquote works for you.
Yeah, sure.
Because the thing is, if you don't have a model that you're using to change the variables, the fitness variables in your programming to reach your goals, which you've defined, then what do you do if you don't meet your goals? What do you do if you do meet your goals? How do you know what worked?
Yeah.
Right? That's it's a critical thing. And
especially if you haven't recorded it and you haven't, there's no level of it's like a scientific experiment. You might have had this great result, but you never took the time to record all of the things that you did during that process.
Exactly. If like in our training or our exercise example we talked about earlier, if you're changing a million variables at once, you have no idea what worked.
Yeah.
So the key here is that the framework gives you a way to filter out good information from bad information. There's a lot of information in the world. That's probably one of the biggest issues.
Information overload.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues we face in today's, in the modern age, right? The information age is there's so much information, but without context, it's meaningless.
And everyone's an expert. We talked about this earlier that I get patients all the time that'll come in and say, well, I read this on Google and I read this on MedWeb or WebMD, right? Or I read this on MedNet and I read this. And the only challenge with that is they're reading that information with a set of glasses and a perception level that is significantly different than mine.
Yeah.
They might not have the foundational medical training to be able to look at data online and say, that's not correct because that doesn't match modern biology, or that doesn't match pathophysiology, or that doesn't make sense. That's not scientifically correct. And so, through doing what we're doing with the 40 Fit Radio podcast, the goal is that masters can develop their framework built on solid biology. And everyone has some level of confirmation bias, let's face it. But we hope that bias is based on science.
Right.
It's based on science and experience, and then lastly, anecdotal evidence.
Yes. And I think that's the key, right? Is that you hone your own biases through the framework that you develop, right?
Right.
We all know that our models, right? When we talked about the starting strength model in strength training, we know it's a really good model because we've observed good outcomes.
Hundreds of thousands of people do it.
Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times. It works every single time it's ever been tried. But we know it can't be 100% right.
Right.
There's parts of
Right.
it that are wrong. However, it's been honed over time so that the error bars are really small on it. The
Right.
stuff that's wrong is not very wrong at all, right?
No.
And that's what happens when you have a framework that you apply to your health and fitness, is that the error bars, when you make a mistake, the mistakes get smaller because you've considered where you are, and you can make adjustments, and you've got data and all the stuff that we've been talking about, and you've got a way to organize all of your thinking.
Well, we were just discussing this a few minutes ago about, I saw a post on one of the social media outlets on the interwebs. I call it the interwebs because it angers people sometimes, because I know it's the internet.
Is that what they called it in like 94?
Yeah, actually, it was called the intranet first. Actually, so I'll tell you this quick story. So I saw the internet for the first time when I was in college. That'll tell you how old I am. I saw it in college. I was in my undergraduate program. I might have been in physical therapy school at the time. Basically, I was at the university, and I went into the library, and I looked through the microfiche.
Yeah, I was going to say the card catalog.
The card catalog too, and all of those things. And I couldn't find this medical journal that I was looking for to do a paper on. And so the librarian, she walked up to me and she said, "Well, hey, why don't we look for this on the World Wide Web?" And I went, "World Wide Web? What's the World Wide Web?" Yeah. And she goes, "Well, it's the internet." And I went, "Well, what's the internet?" She said, "Well, it's with this large network of computers, and they all talk together, and they share information." I was like,
and they know things.
And they know where you're at. That's scary. Do your parents know where you are right now? No,
the internet does.
Yeah. It's kind of freaky. But I was kind of like, wow, that's kind of weird. So she pulled up the article, the journal article from some other library somewhere or somewhere out in space. And she printed it out, and there I had the article, and I thought, this is too cool.
Yeah.
This is really cool. And I had a bag phone at the time, that I had a cell phone that was a bag phone. And it went into a bag, and it was the size of a regular phone with a cord.
Yeah.
With a cord.
This is like the 1980s cell phone, like
the
it
was
brick.
1987 or 8-ish.
Okay, yep.
And no, it was before the brick. The
Okay.
Nokia brick was next.
That was
the big Nokia. I had one of those
pre-brick.
too. Yeah, I had one of those too. But this particular bag phone, when you used it in your car, you plugged it into your car to an amplifier that sat in your trunk or wherever else you were going to put it. And that thing probably produced like 19 million megawatts of power. It probably fried my brain.
Picking up Mexican radio stations.
Probably. But that was my first experience with the internet, and I just threw the cell phone in there for extra bonus. But what were we talking about that for? This is a master's moment.
Well, all right. So it was about information, right?
Oh, information.
We're bombarded with information.
yeah.
We got Dr. Oz on TV telling us one thing. We got Oprah telling us something else.
Right. And we got every single website on the internet is an expert at health and fitness. Mm-hmm. Everybody's an expert at health and fitness. And 99.9% of the information is nonsensical. It's all fringe information. Yeah. It's, how you can get this component of your fitness, or how you can do that, how you can tweak this or tweak that. My concept is basically this. Where's your foundation at? Do you have a foundational basic program first? You shouldn't even be thinking, we talked about this in the supplements episode. You shouldn't even be thinking about supplements if you don't have a good whole foods diet.
Yeah.
You need the basics of good nutrition first, and then add other things on top of it. And that's the same concept here, is that we want masters to basically have a basic, good, solid, science, evidence-based foundation, and then the experience of other good coaches and other people within our community, and strength coaches and CrossFit coaches, and use that, and then combine that to have a framework that they can apply on a day-to-day basis in their fitness programs. So,
yeah, and I think there's another benefit to this whole approach that we're advocating, and that is that when you have this framework and you can think for yourself, you now become an active participant in your health. You can't take a pill and get this stuff. You have to go out there and get it for yourself, right? You should definitely find a good coach, find a partner in your health, but they can't do any of the work for you.
Right.
And they can't do the thinking for you, right? It's up to you to find people that know their stuff, and it's up to you to vet them. And once you find them, it's up to you to do the work, right? And let them help you shape your framework and build it up.
And if you're in a position where, let's say you're just now listening to the 40 Fit Radio podcast, and you haven't heard this kind of information before, then hopefully it's enlightening to you that this is a good framework to use and a methodology to use to be able to develop your fitness program. But your fitness program history might go through several iterations before you get to something that really works for you, because you are vetting different concepts and different principles. And, maybe you tried P90X for a while, or you tried this for a while, you tried that for a while. I think what we try to present here is that we try to present solid fitness science-based training principles that people can use that go beyond some program somewhere. They're basic foundational principles that provide the framework, and then you can tweak those things to kind of add or subtract. But the basic nuts and bolts should be fairly similar from masters to masters to masters to masters. Or you have some type of recreational outlet or need that requires you to do a little bit more sport-specific type training, but still the foundational principles are going to be the same. So
yeah, absolutely.
So when we're thinking big picture, guys, one of the things to think about is that this might just be more than just physical change. This might be more than just fitness in the physical capacity area. And we're going to talk about this more in other podcasts. We have a podcast coming up on emotional intelligence. It's a fantastic resource in developing not only our physical bodies, but also developing our emotional bodies, developing our mind, our soul, our spirit, those types of things. And so part of the bigger picture is to realize too that your program is designed to improve your entire quality of life. It's not just designed to improve your physical body. That is the driver for most people. Most people want to look good naked. We talked about that before.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
yeah,
that's
a fine goal.
It's human nature. It's part of the makeup of man, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also think for individuals that do this for any length of time, they also start to develop a deeper understanding of what a good fitness and health program really does to you. There are so many different components of improvement. I know you just did a podcast recently, Trent, with one of your clients.
Yeah.
That's a psychiatrist. And you talked about how strength training helped you in the area of emotional development and dealing with depression and dealing with better confidence. And so I think that the bigger picture here is that when you have a good set of foundational principles, then a good program should really do more than just get you hot, sweaty, and tired.
Right. We talked about hard being an important element of a program, right? I've heard our friend Matt Reynolds on the Barbell Logic podcast say simple, hard, effective, right? Those are kind of the three things that any good training program needs to have. Well, there's something about doing something hard that ends up refining us, for lack of a better term.
Yes, definitely.
When we talk about the strength training that we do, we talk about the conditioning that we outlined.
Using proper nutrition, right? Disciplining yourself in nutrition.
Yeah, making changes in our behavior. It's not easy stuff.
Developing a routine.
And part of the reason it's not easy is because what the payoff is in consistency over time. It's easy to do any of this stuff for 2 weeks, even for 2 months.
Right.
But how about 2 years?
Right.
You know, we all have ups and downs, ebbs and flows, but it's the consistency that really drives all of this stuff that we're talking about. And that's hard. That's really hard. But when we do something hard regularly, we end up changing. You know, it's inevitable. And I understand now in my own journey, which I'm still relatively young in, right? And I haven't been doing this that long. But even now I understand, you know, when I was a little kid, I was fascinated with like monks. It's like, man, why do they do that? Why do they go sit in a temple and meditate and you know, live in poverty? And I kind of get it now.
Sure.
You know, I'm not saying I'm going to go be a monk, right? I like this. We're drinking Weller 107 right now. I like the fineries too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I get the appeal.
Yeah.
It really does. It refines your mind. It refines your spirit in a way. And everybody's journey is different along those lines, but it does end up changing us. And that's what's really interesting. It's hard to understand that until you've been down the road.
Yeah, I think big picture for masters, when you commit yourself to a program that is consistent, that requires you to deny self some, that requires you to change your daily habits, that requires you to develop sustainability, that requires you to maybe delay your gratification, and that makes you, and you do that for no other purpose than you want to be better. You want to be better in whatever area you're doing it for. I think we start with it, like we talked about, in the idea that we're trying to be better physically. But I think that what that then does for us, I'll give you a great example. I trained with my training partner yesterday, Troy, and we were, I think it was on my warm-up sets during the squat. And I told him, man, my mind is all over the place. We've got a lot of business stuff going on. We've got the podcast going on. We've got the gym getting ready to open with Trent here. And we just had a lot of things going on. My oldest daughter just graduated from law school 3 weeks ago, which is fantastic. That's done. So,
yeah.
But my middle daughter's getting married in July, and there's just a tremendous amount of stuff going on in 100 different directions. And I found my mind getting distracted while I was in the middle of my warm-up sets, thinking about those things. Actually, I was thinking about the business things of the day, patient care, the affiliation that our practices are doing right now. And we've got a practice that we just opened, another practice under construction. So my mind was kind of going everywhere. And I told my training partner, I said, man, my mind is all over the place. And I said, I just really got to focus. I got to focus, you know? And he's like, man, just focus in, man. You got this. And so, we had the radio on in the gym, and I just went into that next set with the idea that I'm going to think about nothing but the next 2 reps during my warm-up set. And that's what I did. And then by the time I got to my working sets, I said, I'm not going to think about anything but my working sets. And that's what I did. And I found that eventually it just calmed me. It just kind of calmed the mental chaos, and I like to call it static.
Yeah.
And yeah. I've used this concept before of a radio and static, and our fitness programs can kind of be like that, and so can our lives. Sometimes we've got so much input coming in, and we've got the volume up so high that there's so much static and reverb and just noise that we really can't focus in on the task at hand and be effective.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the tyranny of the urgent kind of concept too. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to focus in and funnel down on the thing that's important at that time and get the other distractions outside our mind. And so our fitness programs can be like that too. By the time I got done training, I was much calmer. I really wasn't thinking about the day. I was really just thinking about training. For me, that's a respite. For me, that's more than just physical discipline. That's also a mental break of an hour and a half that day from the day's chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gives my mind a chance neurologically to shut down a little bit and think about some very simple tasks that are very hard, but at the same time, are not as bombarded by, 1,000 different inputs at once.
Right.
So
right.
it's refining. It really is refining. And to be able to do that in self-discipline and to be able to step outside yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to discipline myself for this period of time to not do anything else but train. That right there is liberating. That same habit can be used in our spiritual life, in our financial lives, in our social lives, in our business life, in our marriage life, whatever else we're doing, we can apply that same principle in many different areas of our lives.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's exactly what I told Dr. Pewter, who is my client, hosts the Psychiatry and Psychotherapy podcast. When he had me on, he asked me, well, Trent, strength training has really helped you with depression. Do you still get depressed? And I said, yeah, of course I do.
Sure.
I still deal with this. So it doesn't, training doesn't fix all of our problems, but it does give us this toolbox that helps us, as you said, stand outside of ourselves, check in. It's our self-care in a way.
Sure.
And it can become really profound.
It's therapeutic.
Yeah.
It's therapy. I want to say it's therapy, but I say everything's therapy because that's what I do.
And right. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because Dr. Pewter, right, he actually prescribes
strength training
to his patients. They get the little script and they're like, oh, what? Squats, deadlifts, presses. Wait, this is
not.
There's no milligram.
I was looking for Wellbutrin or Cymbalta, dude.
Yeah. Exactly.
I need a mood elevator or antidepressant, but I hope what everybody gets out there on this podcast is basically, number one, this is a great resource to come to. We're what I consider myself an expert in some areas. I think I'm an expert. I think I have enough knowledge and enough background, enough experience, enough education to be able to produce some pretty good information in some areas. In other areas, I think I'm learning in every area, but in other areas, I'm much less learned, and I'm continuing to learn on a daily basis. But hopefully what masters can do is they can come to this podcast, they can come to the information that we provide, build a basic framework for their program. And we've talked about this in the big picture in those first 9 episodes. And that is, strength should be your foundation. We talked about that. Then you got to support it with good quality nutrition, whole foods nutrition. And you got to determine whether you need caloric deficit, surplus, or you need a net balance, a negative net balance, just boom, straight across the board. Then we talked about rest and recovery and sleep and all those things. And we talked about programming, and we've talked about, all these different components, but all those components, like we've talked about, they all are the pieces of the puzzle. Let's say you looked at a puzzle and you noticed that there were 4 pieces missing. That would bother me. That would I would be looking for those 4 pieces to that puzzle. Right. Where are those 4 pieces? What are those 4 pieces? What am I missing? And then I would try to figure out on the puzzle what parts are missing in that design work, whatever the puzzle is, that I need to go find, and put in the right spot. That's the way programming is for fitness and health. That's the way really we want people to look at it is that we want you to put the puzzle together and we want you to have all the basic pieces. It doesn't mean that puzzle is not going to change along the way, but we want you to start with something that's foundationally solid, that has the basic scientific biological principles that are built on good health principles for the master's population. And then from there, you can specialize, tweak it, do what you want to do to be able to make sure that program is really meeting your specific needs if you have an avocation, a recreation, or if you're in competitive sports or something like that. But that is the big picture. It is recognizing that if you're bouncing all over the place, you're probably not getting the big picture. If you're doing something that has no goals and that you're not specifically looking at the stressors to create a specific adaptation and you haven't thought about that, you're probably not using the big picture. If you have no program at all, what if you've been doing the same thing for a year? You're probably not thinking big picture.
Yeah.
And those are the concepts and the principles we want to be able to let people know about.
Well, I'm excited to see where this podcast is going to go deeper in all these different topics. I hope that y'all have enjoyed this foundation series and that you're now a more educated consumer of fitness. You now have the tools to go out and build your own foundation. And we hope to see you on the website. Come engage with us. In the future, we're going to have seminars and other events going up on the webpage. So come check us out.
Go to Instagram.
Yep.
Go to Instagram, 40fit Radio at 40fit Radio on Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook on 40fit Masters Community. It's a group page. Really what I want you to do is be looking to our new podcast and be able to get some more specific details on some of these previous principles that we've discussed. There are many things that we've discussed in these first 9 or 10 podcasts that we're going to be able to get much more specific with. We're going to have maybe podcast series on the different principles so that you can then put some more meat on the bones of your fitness program. So,
absolutely. Yeah. And let us know if you have a particular topic you're interested in, additional questions on stuff we've already covered that you want to see covered in more depth. Let us know. Shoot us a message. Reach out to us on those social media platforms. Send us an email. And until then, we'll see you next time.
See you in the next podcast.